girls and children of all ages. Good morning. Can you all hear me, or do we need to set this thing to Juanita volume? Okay. That's really all that matters. I need it so loud that Juanita can hear me from home.
I'm sure she can.
I'm sure. Can you hear me?
Barely.
Okay. All right, so you guys had a nice break. Phil came in, did some really good lessons, and then, now it's time for y'all to get thrown back to the wolves. So, we never did finish Matthew, the Sermon on the Mount, so we're going to finish it maybe, hopefully, probably, most likely today. So, Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Does anybody remember anything? Now, I will give you a little bit of a pass because it has been more than a day or two. Does anybody remember anything about what we talked about in the Sermon on the Mount? Anywhere in there, from 5, 6, or 7? Anything at all? Not a single thing. Bill is laughing because he's like, there is no way that I could remember that far back. It's okay. Did you take your Geritol? Anybody? Anyone? Anywhere? Anything? Nothing? Okay, so the Sermon on the Mount is a thing that happened a long time ago. Jesus did it. Jesus said some words on the side of a mountain, right? No? Nobody? Nothing? Yeah, let's you can read that, yeah. All right, so Sermon on the Mount, Jesus. Who was Jesus talking to? Jews, because Jesus was a Jew, and he lived as a Jew, and he died as a Jew. Bless you. Because if he did not live and die as a Jew, then what God had planned out would not have worked, right? Because it came first into the Jew and then into the Greeks, right, or the Gentiles, right? So Jesus had to be born, live, and die as a Jew. So it was very important that Jesus was born, lived, and died as a Jew, so he would know all of the law, right? Okay, so that's what gave the significance to the fact that Jesus got up on the side of this hill and he said, well, you've heard the scribes and the Pharisees, mainly the Pharisees, say. You have heard the ancients say. You have heard that it was said. But I tell you, because Jesus was a Jew and he would know the law. Okay, so there's one thing that we remembered. Anybody remember anything about salt? Other than it tastes good? If it loses its flavor, it's useless, just like our worship, right? If our worship does not have salt in it, then our worship is useless. That's why Jesus said, if you have a problem with your brother, leave your gift at the altar, go be reconciled to your brother and come back, because if your worship is not going to have value to God, it is actually an abomination, as the Old Testament would put it. So if your worship does not have your heart in it, if you are not intentional with your worship, you're not intentional with your service, if you are not intentional with your relationship to God, it has no value. And God is not in the discount business, right? That's why He makes living a Christian life not so easy. It would be much easier to do all the easy things. You can't do it by degrees, so you're either doing it or you're not doing it. You're either hot or you're cold, because if you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out.
You're either going forward or you're going backwards.
Exactly. If you're not moving forward in your spiritual life, you are moving backwards in your spiritual life. And if you're moving backwards in your spiritual life, where are you going? I know it's rough, right, this early on a Sunday morning to be to that so quickly, but the point of the matter, the fact is, if you are not intentional with your relationship to the Lord, you don't have one. You get baptized 453 times, but if your heart is not in it, you're just as unsaved as if you had never done it to start off with. That's why baptizing babies has no value. Babies don't understand what sin is. They don't know. It's not that, it's not a great symbol or, what's the word I'm looking for? ceremony, that you as the parent intend to teach this baby the word of the Lord to get them to a point in life that they can understand their state and status with the Lord, and that they would understand the need and the value of the relationship with the Lord so that they can be baptized into, not because of, but into a relationship with the Lord. Right? So what's the difference between baptism into and the baptism for? We haven't talked about that, have we? Okay. We'll do that next Sunday. I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of it now. So, Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist, right? And what was he baptized? And how was he baptized? Was he baptized for the remission of sins, or was he baptized into a relationship with the Lord through the Holy Spirit and a remission of sins? He was baptized into the first one. He was baptized for the forgiveness of sin. Because until Jesus died as a Jew, perfecting the Judaistic system of law and sacrifice, the second baptism that I talked about didn't exist. That is what Romans covered in chapter 6. Yeah, 6. Yes. Yeah, just pick one. It talks about it a lot. Anyways, moving on. Matthew chapter 7 is where we left off. All right, so we've kind of caught back up. We've got ourselves back in the mindset of Chad's teaching, so answer the questions or he'll beat you with them. And we didn't get very far into 7, if I remember correctly. We only got just the first couple of verses in, so we're just going to go ahead and start back over 7:1. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way that you judge others, you will be judged. With the measure that you use, it will be measured to you. Yes. So, we've all been taught throughout the history of our Bible school teaching, don't judge others, don't judge others. That's exactly right. Don't judge others. But what's the difference between judge and judgment? Keith, can I say, Keith, you are going to hell. Is it right for me to do that? No. Do I have the authority to say, by the authority of Chad, dominoes, we all play dominoes, you are going to hell? No, I don't have that authority. None of us do. Do I have the authority to say, Keith, brother, come here, let me talk to you. According to what Jesus said, what you're doing is just out of step. And if you continue down this path, I'm afraid that you may end up going to hell. Am I within my authority to do that? Okay, I was hearing crickets. I was hearing crickets to an easy answer. Oh, yeah, that came quick today. But I am within my authority to do that. I can say, Travis, buddy, you got to lay off the whiskey, son. Okay, you need to taper on off. Okay.
While you have a bad whiskey sour bread, it's
Yes.
a good idea though.
Yes. Whilst I am currently drunk on whiskey, for me to tell him, there's a difference between judging others and passing judgment. Here in Matthew chapter 7, he's talking about passing judgment, saying, Bart, no hope for you. You're done. That's what he's talking about. He's not saying, hey, going to your brother and making a discernment about a situation. We're in fact told to do that in other places in the New Testament. There's such a thing as righteous indignation. Right? It's okay for you to be mad with Kyler because he's been gone for a long time. He's been forsaking the assembly. Now, that's not true. He just hasn't been here. He doesn't live here anymore. I don't know if y'all knew that. Wendy, did you know that? That he doesn't live here anymore? Having that empty nest is nice, isn't it? There's a whole lot less mess in the house, isn't there? So passing judgment in the eternal sense is what Jesus is talking about here, not using your judgment. If we didn't use our judgment every day, we would die real quick. If I didn't drive up to an intersection and look both directions and say, I can make that using my judgment, and then I just drove off in the middle of it saying, Jesus will protect me, I'm going to get smashed immediately. We have to use judgment, not pass judgment.
And we got to use the same judgment for others as we use for ourselves.
That's right, because if I go to Travis and say, hey man, you need to taper off that whiskey while I'm over here womanizing, it's kind of just flat out dumb, isn't it? Because James will tell you later on in the, I think it's in the book of James, that there's no degrees of sin. If you have broken the law, you have broken all of the law. So if I told a lie, that's the same as if I murdered somebody in God's eyes. Because wrong is wrong and right is right. Excuse me. So, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank or log that is in your own eye? How can you, excuse me, I ate a Snickers bar on the way over here and it's just backing up. How can you say to your brother, let me take that speck out of your eye when all the time there is a plank in your own? You hypocrite. And hypocrite's kind of a strong word. Let me just, you're a hypocrite. That's a rather strong thing to say to somebody. But Jesus has no problem with using that here, does he? You hypocrite. He has no problem doing it to the scribes and the Pharisees, does he? You hypocrites, you brood of vipers. You hypocrite. First, take the plank out of your own eye so that you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. If you can't control yourself, you have no business trying to control someone else. If I can't keep my filthy mouth in check, I have no business going to somebody and saying, you number one, you shouldn't use those words. Those are bad. Or if I can't keep myself from emptying out a whiskey bottle, that I have no business going to somebody else and saying, you really shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be partaking in those things because that's against God's law. That's just absolutely stupid. If you're going to be doing something wrong, you have no business. And if you're going to be doing something wrong and you have no intention of changing that, you have no business. I have no business. We have no business trying to tell somebody to stop doing something. If you're not going to walk the line, then don't tell somebody to walk the line.
And there are some that sincerely don't see themselves out of step.
That's exactly what Jesus is talking about. You can't see this. You can't see the log in your eye because you're so worried about the speck in theirs. You're more worried about what somebody else is doing than worrying about what you're doing. And that goes back to our intention, our intentional service, our intentional relationship. If we don't have that intentional relationship, we are not going to express the self-correction, the self-judgment, the self-awareness to know that, man, I've got a big old branch sticking out of my eye. I better get that out of there so that I could be of service to someone who has a speck. That's part of the difference between judgment and judging. Really boils back down into the intention of it. Just like everything that Jesus has talked about in the Sermon on the Mount, it will always boil back down to your intentions or your heart, your mindset behind it. If you are truly trying to go out and help your brothers and sisters improve their relationship, first of all, you've already gotten yours figured out. Now, that's not a great way to say that because ain't nobody got it all figured out.
You're going forward.
Well, yes, you are going forward, but you have removed from yourself the stumbling blocks that you're likely to fall upon. drugs are not a stumbling block for me. There's zero danger of me becoming addicted to any sort of drug. So I don't concern myself in my daily walk with God about whether, Lord, please help me to not become a drug addict. That's just not a thing that I need that help with. I have the self-awareness and the introspection through my relationship with God to know what is a problem for me and what is not a problem for me. Later on in the New Testament, I believe it's Paul, it may have been Peter. If it wasn't Paul, it was Peter, and if it wasn't Peter, it was Paul. Talks about, I become all things to all men so that I might win the more. For me to walk into a liquor store to preach to somebody is not going to be a stumbling block for me. I'm not going to walk in there and be overpowered by the desire for liquor that I can't function, that I become endangered of stepping outside of my relationship with the Lord. The same thing with gambling. I could walk into a casino and have absolutely no danger of stepping outside of my relationship with the Lord. It's that sort of thing. Being able to know yourself well enough in your walk, in your relationship, to know that I can help you with this because that is not a problem for me. Knowing your limitations, I guess would be a good way to put it. I'm not going to say that out loud. That was really rude. Knowing how to help somebody without endangering yourself, right? I can help Bart with his desire to womanize because I have moved past that desire for myself. I have removed that plank from my eyes so that I can see that speck in his. And I can say, Bart, here's how I did it. I decided that it just ain't worth it. All right? It's really great at the time. The long-term implications are awful. So just, think about that. That's what is being spoken towards here. It's not so much that you have to be this absolutely perfect person in order to remove a speck from your brother's eye, because there is one who is perfect. Has there been any others? So no. So for Jesus to give us this advice and say, well, first remove the log from your eye before you remove the speck from your brother's, if you have to be perfect to do so, that's not going to happen. So you have to understand the difference between intention and inscription. Here it says, take out your own, have no. So if you took that in the most literal form, it would say, have no temptation, have no sinful desires, have no this before you say anything to your brother. Well, does anybody in this room have absolutely zero temptations of any kind? That's a question. If you do in fact have nothing that tempts you, please raise your hand, because I really want to talk to you, because I would love to know how you did it. So if that's the case, then no one could help anyone ever at any point, right? So, root of the matter, don't pass judgment on others because of what they're doing, because number one, it's not within your authority to do, and number two, I guarantee you're struggling with something. So you definitely don't want to pass judgment on somebody based on your understanding, because now your understanding is what's going to get used on you. And if you're passing judgment on somebody for being sinful, guess what? You're already messed up. You're already out. Okay. Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under feet, turn around and tear you to pieces. That's a neat little bit that he put in there. What's it mean?
It means there's going to be people that just don't really care.
They just don't care.
They just don't care.
Not interested.
And they may even be the ones that are trying to get you away from what you care about. But they don't care. So if they don't care, why give it to them? It's not saying don't try. You've got to identify, because how do you identify that swine.
You would have to use judgment.
You would have to use judgment to do that.
So why then, it doesn't seem like this verse is connected to the ones above it or the ones below it. It doesn't seem like it is. So why is it here in this spot? If you have a speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and you have a plank in your own eye, take the plank out of your own eye before you try to take the speck out of your brother's eye. But remember this, you may get the log out of your eye and try to take the speck out of your brother's eye, and you know what he may do? He may turn around and tear you to pieces. Now, I'm fairly certain that Jesus said that there. Because in the context of what Jesus is talking about, the Christian brotherhood, the church as it exists now, did not exist then, right? So, when Jesus uses the term brother throughout the New Testament, there's some language barriers that we, the normal lay folk, do not quite fully comprehend. It's like, idioms don't translate. So like finer than frog hair in English, if you say finer than frog hair in Spanish, it's still finer than frog hair, but people of the Spanish, they don't know what finer than frog hair is. They don't, fine as wine. The same thing. If you translate that into Japanese, Rachel can tell you, if you use idioms in Japanese, they look at you funny because they don't know our American colloquialisms. They don't know them. So, I know this is kind of a roundabout way to get to the point that I'm making. When Jesus put that there, rather than before it or somewhere else, he was talking to a bunch of people. And not all of these people are of the same mindset. And it would be willing to bet that there was some people there who were not Jews, who Jews would consider swine being the unclean, those who are not of the Jewish faith, swine being undesirable, things of that nature. So, do not cast your pearls before swine, before the unclean. You could take it two ways. You could take it as the way we would use it now, in this day and age with our language. If you know somebody's not interested in the gospel, don't try to give them the gospel because they're just going to be mean to you about it, which is 1,000% accurate. You're not going to have a good time trying to teach the gospel to somebody who is not interested in the gospel. As much as I don't care for Mormonism, they get out there and they beat the streets, right? They're on fire. They're doing the thing. And have any of you ever had a nice young man in a white shirt, black slacks, and a bicycle come to your front door? No? Really? You have? Yeah. Were you nice to them? I wasn't. Okay. That's a very situation that you could take that as. Now, the flip side of that coin, due to the language that was used in the mindset and practice of Judaism at the time, Jews didn't really interact with other ethnicities, if you will, or people who were outside of the faith, because there were Jews who were not, not all Jews were, white with blonde hair and blue eyes. That was the Nazis. And that's not at all what Jesus was talking about. But those who were of the Jewish faith. So anybody who was not of the Jewish faith would have been considered unclean and undesirable. So you could make an argument for what Jesus was saying was, don't try to share what I'm telling you now outside of the Jewish faith because they're unclean, and until I have finished what I am here to accomplish, the law is going to stay as it is. And the law currently states no intermingling betwixt, other nationalities. Jews first, everybody else not at all. Very nationalistic, not militaristic anymore, but they would love to be. So, now, I said all of that against this wall. So remember that means that's Chad's opinion on the matter. Don't take that for gospel. Chew on the meat and spit out the bones. So, pearls before swine. You got to talk louder is what you got to remember.
Matthew 10:14, where it says, shake the dust off your feet, the people that won't accept the word that these guys are sent out to talk to you.
Yes.
And so all that ties back to these chapters too, of judging and all that. You have to judge situations as you go through life. And do I stay with this or do I not?
And I believe it's James actually uses the term righteous judgment, not righteous passing judgment, but using righteous judgment in situations. Of the law. I think that's Romans. It's like Romans 1, I think. Pretty sure. And then it goes on to talk about how they are a law unto themselves. All right, well, let's push forward, and we might get through chapter 7. All right, verse 7, and we're going to go to about, 14, 15, something like that. Yo! There you are. Mm-hmm.
For example, Herod gladly hears what John the Baptist has to say, and then whacks his head off for his trouble. And then I think it's in Luke when Jesus is with, when he's in front of Herod. Herod's excited to see him, wants to hear what he has to say, but Jesus shows discernment and says he doesn't have anything to say to Herod.
Yeah.
That would lead me to believe that locally, whatever we're calling it here. I don't think he's talking about whole people groups necessarily. I think it's
Individual basis.
I think it's, hey, and maybe discernment's a better, maybe that's where we're getting confused. We're using, judgment two ways there. I think maybe a better separation is like judgment versus
Discernment. I agree.
How to think about it. I tell my kids like 3 questions. Does this need to be said? Number 2, does it need to be said by me? Number 3, does it need to be said by me right now?
Mm-hmm.
In this moment. That's discernment. That's not. I wouldn't call that judgment. I guess we could call it good judgment. Would be synonymous with that. But I think what we're really talking about in our language is discernment.
And I agree. The only reason I bring up the whole flip side of the coin part of that is I've encountered a lot of folks over the years, and I spent a little while in a place where you had 2 people groups, right? And it was a real small place, and I don't want to say it out loud, but you had one ethnicity and you had another. And that was all that existed there. It wasn't, I don't know that it was planned per se, but that's the way that it worked out in that area. And it's been said out loud for me to hear that casting your pearls before pigs would be going to that other ethnicity group and talking to them about Jesus. So, I don't agree with that. I believe the term I like to use for that is racism. Because I think that's about the truest form of racism that could possibly be. Is don't talk to them about Jesus. They're not white. So I had to speak to it a little bit because I don't agree with it at all. Okay, moving on. Ask and it will be given unto you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened unto you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds. And the one who knocks, the door will be open. Hang on just a second. Lord, I need some money. I guess that's not what he's talking about. It's not. Several times in the New Testament, you'll hear there'll be passages that talk about whatever you ask in my name, I will give to you. Whoever asks will be given. Whoever knocks, the door will be open. Things of that nature. At no point in any time did Jesus or any of the disciples ever intend for you to think that meant that whatever you ask God for, you're going to get. It's not what it means. Let me read that to you in a little bit different tone, okay? Ask for the will of the Lord, and it will be given to you. Seek the will of the Lord, and you will find. Knock on the door of the Lord to find your understanding, His will, and it will be open for you. For everyone who asks for the will of the Lord will receive it. Everyone who seeks the will of the Lord will find it. And everyone who knocks on the door of the Lord, it will be open. I can buy that. Yes, because it goes back to, as we've talked a bajillion times, the intentions of your heart. If the intentions of your heart are on the Lord, or on the will of the Lord, or on a relationship with the Lord, if your intentions are to serve the Lord, you're not going to be asking the Lord, Lord, will you give me $1 million? Your thoughts are going to be a little bit higher up than that, aren't they? What is it that was said? My thoughts are higher than your thoughts. My sight is higher than your sight. Don't start with me. Just hush, you. It was a very biblical concept. It just went over your head. I said something dumb as a kid, and I've been living with it ever since. That had to be 30 years ago. I'm sure we were traveling down a twindy, windy, wisty road when I said it. Yeah, I can play that game too. So, back to the intentions of the heart. If you are seeking out service to the Lord, you're not asking for $1 million. Okay? Yes, I understand $1 million, you can do a lot of good with $1 million in the community and this and all that, but that's really not our concern as Christians, is it? Yes, we want to reach the community and we want to do good in the community, but for what purpose? Why do I want to feed the homeless folks? But why? Why do I care if the homeless folks get fed? So that hopefully they'll live long enough that I can teach them the gospel. It's not because I want to see their bellies full, which I do personally. I don't like to see people going hungry. I don't like to see people falling on hard times. But if my intention is, I just want to give them something so that they'll feel good about themselves, that's not really service to the Lord in any way, is it? That's service to who? Me. And my service to me is of what value to the Lord? Zero.
We're also doing what God told to do.
It is a thing, but for what purpose? If I'm doing it because it makes me feel good, then it's not service to the Lord, even though He did tell me to do it. The intention behind that service needs to be so that I can have an opportunity to get them to the gospel, because God doesn't want any to perish, so neither should we. And I'm not talking about physically perish, we're talking about spiritually perish. If your service is not intentional towards getting an opportunity to teach them the gospel so that they might live yet forever, then what kind of service is it? I'm not saying that, you shouldn't just feed the hungry just to feed the hungry. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you should feed the hungry so that they're full, so that you have a chance to teach them the gospel. Do what? Absolutely not. Well, that came out the wrong way. Absolutely, yes, I'll still feed somebody. Yeah. No, if you're not getting the gospel, get out of here. No. You feed them in hopes that I can only plant the seeds, right? That seed is me feeding them. If that blossoms into a way to teach them the gospel, that's God giving the increase. It's the intentions behind our hearts. If you want to go out and feed people just to feed people because you want to go feed people, there is nothing wrong with that.
No, we have people do that all the time.
And that's a great thing.
And it's great. The idea behind it, though, is when a Christian does it, is he doing it because if the world does it, they're doing it because that's what I want to do, that's what makes me feel good.
Yes.
Or look
But
good.
as a Christian, when we do it, we should be going, I'm doing this, not because it makes me feel good, but because I am serving God. I'm doing good, and I'm doing it to give God the glory. How was I able to feed these people if it wasn't for God giving me the ability
To do so.
to do so?
Deuteronomy says that. God, and it's a roundabout way, God gave you the ability to profit. And he's talking about money. Gave you the ability to profit. So without God, you would not have an ability to profit. And if you don't use that profit to service God, it's not necessarily, well, you're going straight to hell, but, intentions of the heart. Feeding to feed is fine. But a higher service would be feeding to feed so that. Because if we're not getting to the so that, our feeding them only prolongs the inevitable. If I'm not trying to find a way with every person in every situation to help them achieve salvation through an understanding of their relationship and status with God, I'm only prolonging the inevitable. Because at the end of the day, we've talked about this. At the end of the day, does God care about your physical body? No, He doesn't. God at no point ever said, oh, when you become a Christian, your life is going to be good. I'm going to make you healthy. I'm going to make you wealthy. And I'm going to make sure you have an easy life. No. If God cared about your body, how come the apostles were martyred? Was it to increase the reputation of the kingdom of God? No. Did it increase the reputation of the kingdom of God? Yeah, it did. Why do children fall sick and ill and perish? Why do Christians still suffer physical ailments? Why do we get in car wrecks and die? Is it because God is so concerned about our physical body? No. The only thing God cares about that is anything to do with you is your soul. Is your soul right? Is your soul wrong? Is your soul right? Cool. You're going to have a new physical body and have spiritual body in heaven. Corinthians 15, 2 Corinthians, somewhere in there. You're going to have a new spiritual body. You're going to live forever. He doesn't say you will live forever on this earth. He's not interested in our body. To the same point, feeding those who are hungry just to feed them, but not finding a way to make that into the gospel, is only prolonging the inevitable. They're still going to die. Those who die outside of Christ are still going to die, and they're still going to go to hell. So if you're feeding them just to feed them, that's okay. That's not sinful in any way for you to do that. But if you're feeding them just to feed them, with no hope of finding a way to teach them the gospel, you're only prolonging the inevitable. Now, in no way, with your intentions of teaching them the gospel, in no way can you guarantee that that opportunity will arise. You can't guarantee that. There is no guarantee. And if you put up a sign that says, if you want to eat this spaghetti, you better listen to this sermon, I think that's wrong to do too. I know that's a big pill to swallow. But without that intention of trying to get their soul into a saved status with the Lord, through the Lord, because it ain't coming through you. then that service is not really for the Lord. That service is for you to feed them because you want to, which is also a good thing. But without their soul being secure, they're not going to go to heaven if you feed them. Yeah.
The illustration that he's using is a hungry child. And, I mean, and so that's easy. Like, we shouldn't spend too much time arguing whether is this about excess or not. Like, give me the winning lottery numbers. I think that's pretty clear. That's not what he's talking about. But I would say on the feeding thing, we're going to get down, not to jump too far ahead, but verse 12, we're going to get to the golden rule stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all relational. You think about, the person, you can feed somebody who doesn't get it right now, knowing that, like, hey, this may open the door later because I've done something relational here. The same way with the hungry child. I would venture that most of us in here, that the people that have fed us the most in our life are, probably your mother, and, your dad probably bought the groceries in some respect. But those are the people that probably have put the most money in the bank relationally with you, and are going to have the opportunity to share, the most truth with you in an impactful way that somebody would receive. So, I would say that, like, meeting somebody's basic human need, which whatever the hierarchy is, oxygen, water, and then probably food, that's pretty, that's pretty high up there.
Oh, yeah.
Taking care of someone's basic need is going to do something relationally that, if nothing else, will give you an opportunity or a leg to stand on.
It'll open the door for you to have an opportunity to share that at a later point.
Yes.
And that, I guess maybe I wasn't making my point well, is that's what I was talking about, is if you're feeding them just to feed them and send them on their way, and I'm never going to see you again, that's okay. You can do that.
And you don't have any way to know.
And that's right.
In that moment, hey, is this person going to swing back by?
We're planting the seed, and if God gives the increase, then God gives the increase. If God doesn't give the increase, that's not on you. It's not, it's not like you're going to get to judgment and God says, well, you fed that guy, how come you didn't save him? Well, God, I can't. That's not the situation that we're living in. If you who are evil know how to give good gifts, how much more does the Father give good gifts to those who ask Him? So in everything you do unto the others as you would have them do unto you. If I was hungry, I'd want you to feed me. And if I was hungry, I would feed you. Or if you were hungry, I would feed you. Do unto others. But I would also unto myself, I'm very, very interested in making sure that I'm saved. So I'm going to do unto others as I would have them do unto me.
Kind of the idea, we don't often think about it this way, but if you had a magic pill that could save people, we want to give it to everybody. And a lot of times we don't always think about it.
Yeah.
I think it'd be good if we really did try to live that way and actually think that way, because that really is the way it is.
Mm-hmm. I would hate to have to swallow this, though. All right, that was bell 1, so we have very little time. I don't think we're going to make it, just to be honest with you. That was number 2? All right, I love you. We'll finish next week. I thought we were going to make it. We didn't.